Okay, today we are looking at lecturing on sections 4, 5, and 6. On these sections, we are going to be working with fractions, and we're going to be looking at adding and subtracting fractions. We're going to be looking at finding a least common denominator for the fractions, and we are going to work with order of operations. Okay, so overall, those are the main concepts that we're going to be looking at. To begin with, if you have a fraction that you're adding, and let's say we have 4, let's say we have 4 elevenths plus 3 elevenths plus 1 11th. If we're going to add these fractions, all three of these have the same denominator. If your denominator is the same, we say that they have a common denominator. If the denominators are alike, we simply combine the numerators. So we have 4 plus 3 is 7, and 7 plus 1 is 8. So that fraction would be 8 elevenths. And you're done with that particular problem. If we have, let's say, 17 eighteenths, and let's say we're going to subtract 7 eighteenths. Again, the denominators are the same, so all we're going to do here is combine the numerators. 17 minus 7 would leave us with 10, so we have 10 eighteenths. Now this fraction can be reduced. Remember those divisibility rules. These both have even numbers, 0 and 8, so we can divide them by 2. Half of 10 is 5, and half of 18 is 9. Now we can say this one is simplified to its lowest terms. If we have, let's say, negative 3 tenths, and we're going to subtract a negative 7 tenths. Remember, when we subtract, we never really subtract. What we do is we write it as addition. So we rewrite it as adding, and then we do the opposite of the negative, which makes that a positive 7 tenths. Now we have one positive, one negative. So remember, those rules of integers we learned in dma0 are still applying. It's just we're working with fractions now. So we find the difference with the 7 and 3, which gives us a difference of 4. The 7 has a larger absolute value, so we're going to use the sign for that one, which makes it a positive 4 tenths. And yet again, for the same problem, they're both even. We can reduce this to 2/5. So when you have the same denominator, you can just simply add and subtract the numerators and then simplify. If you want to do these using your calculator, we looked at 2 ways we could type in fractions the other day. One way that we looked at typing them in is you can use alpha y equals number 1, and then it has the appearance of a fraction with both numerator and denominator. You can then key each of these in, and each time you just do alpha y equals number 1 before you type in your fraction. When the cursor is still in the denominator, use the right arrow key to move it out from underneath, and then you can continue on to the next part of your problem. So this was the first one that we just did. I just entered it on the calculator, and we get our 8 elevenths. If you want to do one of these problems and you want to use the other method that I showed you, you can type in your fraction in a parenthesis. So I can type in 17 eighteenths in a parenthesis, minus, and then in the next parenthesis, type in the 7 eighteenths. If you use this method where you're using the parenthesis, you're going to get your answer in the form of a decimal. It's a very simple way to change that back to a fraction. The keystrokes are math, and then you're going to use enter 2 times, and that reduced it already to the lowest terms, 5/9. Okay, when you have these subtraction problems like we had a moment ago, if you're going to do the negative 3 tenths, I recommend type it in exactly as you see that problem originally written. So we're not going to type it in as adding the opposite. We're going to type this in the same way that you see the original problem written. So let's do our -3/10, and then we're going to subtract, and the negative sign again is at the bottom, and we are going to subtract the 7/10. And as you see, that's simplified to our 2/5. Another thing that we're going to look at is how to make an equivalent fraction. So we are going to write an equivalent fraction. And again, I'm going to show you two ways by which you can do this. Let's say we have the fraction 3/5, and we want to write an equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 75. Okay? First, we would ask ourselves, 5 goes into 75 how many times? So 5 goes into 75 15 times. So what we could do is if we multiply 5 times 15, that's going to give us the 75. Any number you can multiply times one whole and have an equivalent expression. So if my denominator is 15, then 15 fifteenths is the one whole. 3 times 15 would give us 45. So our equivalent fraction for 3/5 is going to be 45/75. All we did was calculate what we need to multiply by to get the 75. Let me show you another method. This is the method I oftentimes prefer to use, and it's actually going to lead into what we're going to do when we are in Module 3 with proportions. This is the way that you see it written in your book. If you have this, if you were to take the two numbers that are diagonal from each other, we are going to cross multiply those two numbers, and then we're going to divide by the number that's paired with the value we're solving for. So we're going to do, let me write this down, we're going to do 3 times 75 divided by 5. And that's going to give us the solution we're looking for. And you can type it all in at one time. 3 times 75 divided by 5, and that gives us 45. That's the way I recommend making your equivalent fractions. The next the next thing we're going to look at is a skill practice of finding common denominators. First, let me explain to you how we go about finding a common denominator, and then once we look at that, then we are going to look at the other method using our calculator as we're doing these. So let me show you both ways. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give us the fractions 23/18 and 1/21. In the skill practice that you're going to do, you will not have to do anything with the numerators. All we're looking to do right now is to find the least common denominator. That's what we're looking to do right now, just a skill practice. In order to do that, I would take the number 18, and if I factor 18 completely, that would be 2 times 9. 9 can be factored into 3 times 3. If I were to factor 21, 21 would be 3 times 7. So what I do is I am factoring to the prime numbers. Factoring to prime numbers. That's what we do first. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at, and we have to use all of the factors in the denominator. So to get the least common denominator, The 18 has a 2. The 21 does not have anything, but we still have to use a 2. When we look at the 3's, the numerator has 2 3's. The 18 has 2 3's. The 21 has 1 3. We're going to need to use both of those. And then last, we have only 1 7, so we need to use that as one of our factors as well. At this point, all we have is 2 times 3 times 3 times 7. So 2 times 3 times 3 times 7, and our least common denominator is going to be 126. Now, let me show you keystrokes of how to do the same thing on your calculator. If you're on your calculator, we're going to press the button Math, and we're going to arrow to the right to NUM. So we're going to press Math. We're going to arrow right to where it has NUM. And then we are going to select number 8, the one that says LCM. We're going to choose number 8, LCM. The M stands for multiple, the least common multiple, which in our case, the multiple is the number in the denominator. Once you do that, you can only type in 2 numbers at a time. So let's choose number 8. I'm going to type in the 18, put a comma in between, and then the number 21. And that gives us the 126. So you can choose which method you prefer. I tend to like the second method. Let's look at one more problem. Let's have these 3, and I'm just going to list the denominators because that's all that we're focusing on is the denominators. We have a 14, a 15, and a 12. If we do it longhand, we're going to factor each of these. 14 would be a 2 times 7. 15 would be a 3 times 5. 12 would be 4 times 3, so that's a 2 times 2 times 3. So to find the least common multiple, the most 2's that any of them have would be 2 2's. The most 3's that any of them have is 1 3. The most 5's would be 1 5, and the most 7's would be 1 7. Okay, so let's do that. We have 2 times 2 times 3 times 5 times 7. So our least common multiple here is 420. Now, if we do our calculator steps to do this, let's see what that's going to look like. And I'm just going to write down what we're going to be typing in. When we do this, we're first going to start by typing in the 14 and 15. You can only do 2 at a time. So math, arrow right, number 8. We're going to type in our 14 and our 15. That gives us an answer of 210. So when we repeat, we're going to put the answer, and the answer we had gotten was 210, and then we're going to do the third number, which was the 12. So math, arrow right, number 8, type in our answer of 210, and then we are going to do our third number, which was the 12, and we get our 420. So let's now take 2 fractions that have different denominators and apply what we have just learned so that we can do that calculation. If we have 2 thirds minus 1 fourth, the first thing we need to recognize is we have different denominators. So we need to find a common denominator. Okay, so math, arrow right, number 8. Our denominators are 3 and 4. So our least common denominator is going to be a 12. So we want to write 2 thirds, so we have a denominator of 12, and we want to write 1 fourth, so we have a denominator of 12. Let's use that method we used a few moments ago, where we would cross multiply and divide. And we're going to do that for both of these. So we're going to do 2 times 12 divided by 3. 2 times 12 divided by 3 gives us a numerator of 8. So 2/3 is the same as 8/12. For 1/4, we're going to do 1 times 4 divided by 12. Oh, wait a minute. I typed it in wrong. 1 times 12 divided by 4, excuse me. 1 times 12 divided by 4, and that gives us 3. So our numerator is 3. So 1/4 is equal to 3/12. 8 minus 3 is 5 over 12, and that will not reduce. So if you're checking this, type in the original in the calculator. So we are going to do the original, which is 2/3 minus the 1/4, and that's going to give us 5/12, which is the same answer we just came up with. If we're doing a comparison of fractions, and we want to determine which is greater than or which is less than, this is, to me, the easiest way to do a comparison of fractions. What I would like to do is show you that if you cross multiply, we are going to do 6 times 9. What is 6 times 9? That would give us 54. If we do 11 times 5, that would give us 55. Now ask yourself, which of these numbers is larger? The 55 is larger, so the fraction 5/9 is greater than the fraction 6/11. I just did a simple comparison when I cross multiplied. If what we had was the same number, it would be equal. We have already talked about order of operations before. So as you move into section 6, in section 6 is going to be still order of operations. When we do these, we begin with simplify first what you have in parentheses, then your exponents. We would then multiply or divide working from left to right. And then last, we would add or subtract working from left to right. So if we were to have, for example, 1/2 times -1/3 squared, the first thing we're going to do is simplify the -1/3 squared. That's a -1/3 times a -1/3. Negative times negative is a positive. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3 is 9. We now have 1/2 times 1/9. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 9 is 18. If you want to key one in, such as this, we would have alpha y equals number 1. We would have our 1/2 times, now notice, the negative sign is meant to be squared, so we do our parenthesis first, then our negative, before we type the fraction 1/3. Remember, come out from under the radical, close your parenthesis, and then you're going to square. And that gives you the same answer, the 1/18. The last thing that we're going to look at in section 6 is how to write improper fractions and mixed numbers, how to interchange and go from one to the other. So let me first start with, let me give you 8 and 5/9. And if I want to convert this to a improper fraction, I'm going to begin with the 9, and I'm going to multiply 9 times 8, and then we're going to add the numerator 5. The denominator is going to stay the 9, okay? So 9 times 8 is 72, and 72 plus 5 is 77. 9 times 8 plus 5 gives us 77. Let's say I gave you 3 and 4 11s. I would start in the denominator. I would say 11 times 3 is 33, and 33 plus 4 would give us 37 11s. So you're simply going to start with the denominator. You're going to start here, multiply first, then add the numerator, and the denominator is going to stay the same. Now, let's say if you were to have an improper fraction. Let's say we had 111 over 6. In this case, we have a numerator. Let's see. We have a numerator over a denominator. We're going to take the denominator, divide it into the numerator. The answer you get on top is going to be your whole number of the mixed number. You would subtract something. Your remainder is the new numerator, and your denominator here stays the same. So let's do this one. 6 into 111. Okay? 6 goes into 11 one time. 1 times 6 is 6. Then we have a 5 left. Bring down your 1. 6 goes into 51 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. Subtract. Have a remainder of 3. So what we would have here would be 18 and 3 6. It's still not completely simplified. We would want to reduce that fraction, and that would give us 18. 3 6 would reduce to 1/2. Okay? Now let me show you how you can go about doing this using your calculator. If you will go here, I'm going to do alpha y equals. I'm going to choose number 1, and I'm going to type in the 111 over 6. If you press enter, it's still, oh, well, anyway, it reduced it. That's okay. It's still going to give us our same simplified answer in just a moment. What we're now going to do is alpha y equals. Option number 3 is the one that converts your fraction to your mixed number. So when we choose option 3, it gives us the 18 and 1/2. Let's say we had 225 over 15. That one actually came out to be just a whole number. If we had, let's say, 64 over 9, well, excuse me, one more time. Let's say we have 64 over 9. The fraction itself does not reduce, but then when we do alpha y equals and choose number 3 to convert, our mixed number will be 7 and 1/9. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Sections 4, 5, and 6.